one of the things that we've noticed in working with students in the Global Pro Institute and just like the millions, it feels like, of workshops and things that we've been on with people over the last few months is that, everybody's kind of in a position, whether you are still employed or you've been furloughed or it's still precarious on the future of your role right now in the field. We're all looking for ways that we can make ourselves a hot commodity professionally, so that we can become someone that everybody wants to work with, and that maybe we're last on the chopping block, so to speak, or we're the first person people think of when they want to expand their team again. And so I think we wanted to talk about some lessons we've learned that you guys can hopefully take into your career and apply in meaningful ways to help you make sure that you're putting your best foot forward, and you're having a career that you're really proud of and that you really want. I do want to go over a few quick announcements, and they're going to be extra quick now. So in 2 weeks, we're going to have our next Inside Chat, and our special guest will be Kate Moore, the amazing Kate Moore. And we may not do it on Crowdcast because they failed us today, but I'll send out links to that as well. But you can register for it over on Crowdcast as well. But Kate's going to be talking about the future of global internships. If you guys don't know who Kate Moore is, where have you been? She's an international internships OG, and she's the founder of the Global Career Center. She's formerly part of CIEE, AIC, USA, where she and I and Sam and I all work together. It's great. Kate Moore, fun fact, asked me the hardest interview question I've ever gotten. If you want to know what it is, ask me at the end. So she'll be coming on to talk all things international internships and sort of the future of that subset of our field. And then Sam and I are also going to be doing some workshops over the next couple of months as well. Sam's going to do a training all about leveling up with LinkedIn for your career, your organization, your job search, and how you can really capitalize on that platform. And then I'm going to be doing a session all about leveraging social media to build a dynamic, strong, personal and professional brand. And those are coming up July 29th, which is next week for the LinkedIn training. And then the social media training will be later in August. And I'll be sending out emails with all of these details, but I just wanted to let you know those are coming up. And we just wrapped up GPI. So our summer cohort just finished up. Our interns are still cranking along, doing some amazing work in the field. And we're going to be opening the doors for the fall cohort in September. So if you're curious about that, might want to get involved, make sure you're on our email list. Just go to insidestudyabroad.com/GPI. And if you would love to host an amazing international education focused intern in your organization, please reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you about how we can find an intern that could be a really good fit for your organization. And then the last thing that's kind of unrelated, my other business, my other day job, over at Brazenest, I'm hosting a brand new workshop in my Work From Anywhere series next week on how you can capitalize on your skills and experience to build an automated online business. And that's going to be next Wednesday. So you can go, I don't know where to go. Brazenest.com/masterclass should get you there. All right. Enough announcements. Let's get into this. So Sam and I divvied this up. We've got five lessons each of us wanted to share. And we're each probably going to have a little story kind of to back it up, to articulate why this is an important lesson for us. And all of you too, I said this last time, so I can't remember when I'm repeating myself, but if you have other lessons and other advice that, things that you've learned in your own career, please drop them in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. I mean, there's a 1,000,001 lessons we've all learned over the course of our lives. So we'd love to hear other pieces of advice as well as we have this conversation. So I'm going to let Sam take it away.
Top tips.
Yes.
Sam's top tips in my career lessons. So this top tip comes from a colleague of mine, Catherine Hanley, who I used to work with at USA when we were doing university relations. And she says it better because she has a little bit of a Tennessee accent, but always leave sugar in your tracks. I think this is some of the best advice I've ever received, and really does I think helped me out in my career, really in life in general, but my career always. We have a really small field. Most of you guys probably know this. Really small, probably more like 2 or 3 degrees of separation rather than 6 degrees of separation. Probably true in all fields, but especially I think in ours, it's important to remember that someone that you're working with, you might work with again, someone that you may have bumped into at a conference and had an interaction with, you might work with or interview with one day. You might be interviewing someone and they might be interviewing you another day. So I always feel like, not even from a cynical point of view of do it just in case you need that person in the future, but it's just good practice, makes you feel good. You want to be thought of as someone that's helpful, at least I do. And I think just having that in your brain of leaving a little bit of sugar in your tracks with every interaction you have is helpful to people. So you might be some help they need one day, but they also might be someone that you can turn to one day. And unless you have that sort of kindness to fall back on, I feel like then you don't really have that connection. So leave sugar in your tracks.
Mm-hmm. And the only thing I would add to that, even though we promised we wouldn't do this, so the only thing I would add that I think is even more important is that, like in conjunction with what you said, is that especially in those moments of contention or conflict or negative, like say you didn't get a job, or you had a disgruntled partner, or there's a faculty member who you're just not jonesing with. I had a lot of those faculty members. So, figuring out ways that you can even leave those situations on as positive note as you can is so, so valuable. I've not been always great at this.
And I've had negative interactions with people in the field that I remember. I don't really want to work with them or do business with them again, just because it was such a negative experience. Mm-hmm. And, I'm fairly forgiving, so maybe not forever, but I think people do hold on to that. And so, yes, that excellent clarification, because I could have been more specific.
No, I love it.
I do think, in those interviews, that's why follow-up emails and thank yous are really good, even if you don't get the job. Leave sugar in your tracks. That's it.
Yeah.
Brooke, hit me with yours.
All right. I love alliteration, so I tried to make these fun. So my first one is to slay with skills. Mm-hmm. I wish we had like sound to go with this, because there's like a perfect song. So what I mean by that is I think that in our field, especially right now, there's going to be a lot of really qualified candidates for specific jobs that might be coming available, or even for contract roles and consulting roles. And, there's a lot of people who have great experience that might find themselves, for hire right now. And one of the best ways you can differentiate yourself is to have real tangible skills, not just the soft skills, those are valuable, but have hard skills that you can bring to the table. So when people are looking at two very qualified applicants, if you can have sort of like a bonus of this stack of skills that you can bring to the table, that maybe they wouldn't have to outsource that thing to hire somebody else to do it, that you could have it as part of your role, or just the knowledge of how to do that in your role. I think that's a huge, huge differentiator. I know for me in my career, that has helped me up level at each stage, because I amassed skills that a lot of people didn't have at the time. So examples would be, for instance, when I was hired at the University of South Dakota to run the study abroad office that didn't exist previously, they didn't have any infrastructure. They had nothing. It was sort of like I always tell people like that my first assignment when my first day was like, go to HR, do the paperwork, and also, can you go figure out how many students are abroad and who they are and where they are? they just had no idea. And so it was really truly from the ground up. And one of the reasons that I became a top candidate for that role is because I had already built out an application system previously in a 1-month consulting gig I had done for a small university. And I was kind of techie, and I liked like jerry rigging tech tools together. And so I came in and was able to talk about how this office has no budget. There's no line item for a software of any kind, but I showcased how I could come in and establish, a system and a digital system for free. And I'd already done it before. And I think that really helped me, beat out people who had PhDs and other things, because they were like, okay, she can hit the ground running from the administrivia, as Sam likes to call it, and really move the needle there. So I feel that your skill set, the things you actually know how to do, are really going to help you stand out in a marketplace, especially right now, where there's just a lot of really amazing candidates. And so if you can move the dial in your favor with skills, I highly recommend it. I'm a huge proponent of tech skills and strategy-based skills. So my philosophy is that every organization wants to grow their reach, revenue, and their impact. And if you can figure out skill sets that help an organization improve or increase those 3 elements, or one of those elements, you will be a shining star, which leads me to one of my next ones. But so I recommend Skillshare is a great place that's affordable to go get tech skills. Next year, I'm launching the Digital Strategy Academy. So you might want to be joining that, where I'm going to be teaching a lot of valuable skills. So really think about your skill set of what you can do on the job.
And I would add, we're not supposed to add, but I'm doing it. Find the skills that you're good at. It's okay if you're not good at all the skills. I would say double down on either discovering really where your strengths lie, or if you really know what they are, really purposely leaning into those skills and making sure that you're articulating those and how they can help somebody, an organization, etc.
Yeah.
And that takes a long time. That takes time.
All right, you're up.
Me?
Yeah.
So it's me. Tip number 2. Behind every successful international educator, I truly believe there's a colleague that helped write an email. I think especially in the time of COVID, where all of us were working overtime to get students home and to figure out what's going on. I think this especially came to the forefront of my brain. But really what I was thinking of is find your allies and find your mentors in the field that can help you get perspective, and be an ally and be a mentor to those other ones. It's always easier to give someone else advice, right? And sometimes you can't give yourself that advice. And so having a champion or someone that you can work together with, even if they're not in your office, I highly recommend using that support system. For me, Angela Manginelli, she is the woman that looks at all my emails and helps me make sure that I'm not saying something crazy, that I'm thinking of the different perspective, that, I'm not, that I'm really thinking of the other person or the message that I want to get across. She's my go-to email coach, and always has been, and hopefully always will be. But find that person. Again, doesn't have to be in your office. Don't be restricted by who's around you, or your current circumstances. Again, just having that different perspective of someone else that can help you. I find this is helpful working with students. If you're really frustrated with a student, this happens, right? We can admit this. And you write that email because you really want them to learn something, but you're in this space of you will learn this. Sometimes it's helpful to have someone that isn't as invested say, do you want to be right? Or do you want to move this along, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I think other people come in to say, have you thought about framing it this way?
Oh, amen.
To help you. Yeah.
I would love for if you this is making sense to you all, share in the chat if you have your go-to person. You can drop their name, their initials, or just like a heck yes, I have my person. My person is Natalie Garrett. Then,
Yes.
and the typical mojo for me is like, does this sound too bitchy? And then that's what I have to say, like, because I'm just so like straight to the point. I know that about myself. And so I have to go back, add some emojis, add some exclamation points, things like that. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so for me, the next one is the fortune is in the follow-up. And it may not necessarily be fortune. I mean, I just like alliteration again. So, but one of the things it still baffles me to this day is that I have worked in university relations with USA, where I worked for Sam. Obviously I worked at universities and had partner institutions around the world, provider organizations. And then at Go Abroad, I worked with a lot of organizations, mostly providers and some larger universities, and would just like, if a lot of you probably can relate to this, but going to NAFSA and like having a meeting booked every like 15 minutes back to back to back. And I was always baffled how no one seemed to ever follow up, ever. They'd spend all this time, money, energy showing up to this pretty expensive conference, have this huge pavilion in some cases, and they spend so much time and energy to basically have the ability to sit face to face with someone and talk about program development or collaborations and whatever, all the things, and never would hear from them. And so I always made it a point after every event or every conference where if I collected somebody's business card or I had a meeting with them, you bet I followed up. Even if technically there was nothing truly like I had to follow up on, like here's the contract or whatever, I would still follow up and at least acknowledge like, hey, we met and we had a meaningful interaction of some kind and it was great to see you and I'd love to stay connected, and doing some kind of follow up, whether, connecting on LinkedIn with a message, or an email follow-up, etc. And what I would say to that is, especially when you have specific objectives as a professional in an organization, it's not just that initial follow-up. I think a lot of people think like, oh, and we're done now. I think it is really important to remember that people are busy and they have great intentions and they're not always going to be like your email top of mind, and it's okay to have a friendly nudge if you don't hear back, especially if you talked about or had an interaction where there was supposed to be some forward movement and some kind of collaboration. And I think that is key, is that you need to follow up even when it feels like, oh, I don't want to bother anyone, is that, frankly, they'll just ignore you again if they don't want to hear from you. But at least then it's kind of what Sam said about leaving sugar in your tracks. At least you are leaving it on a really positive note of saying, hey, it was great to connect. Just wanted to put this to the top of your inbox real quick or what have you, and see if there's more we can collaborate on. And then at least you've left it open and nice there. And so if they ever do like a search through their email and they see, oh, when was the last time I talked to Brooke? And they realize like, oh, it was 6 months ago and she emailed me twice and I never got back to her. Now they're going to probably feel like, yeah, I should probably take that call with Brooke because I ignore it. Because again, it's a small field and most people, I would say 99% of people in our field are really nice people. They just got a lot going on. And so nobody's like intentionally going, ugh, don't talk to me. And so I just think that there's real value in the follow-up. And I think it's just also a way of just showing some respect for other people, giving any of their time and attention to you through a meeting or some kind of interaction, is just a follow up and say thank you.
Good one.
Thanks.
It's me. Okay. Top tip number 3, choose your boss.
Ooh.
Not the organization. And I'll say choose your boss when you can. So we're not all in the position sometimes of choosing the team that you work with. But what I really mean by this is some of my most rewarding experiences have been because I just really wanted to work with that person. More so, yes, the work's important, but it was an intentional choice to work with someone that I gelled with, that we understood, there was mutual respect. We worked maybe in complementary ways. So not necessarily in the same way, but complementary ways. So a really good example of this was two recent examples. When I started working again with Tony Johnson at the Academic Internship Council that was a part of CIEE. That was a clear decision of, I'd worked with him before, I'd always wanted to work with him again, and an opportunity came up. And the opportunity was important, but I wanted to work with Tony Johnson and Kate Moore. I wanted to work with them. I wanted to learn from them. I liked their style. I knew that they'd be supportive. So sometimes when making decisions, if you're interviewing at multiple places and you're looking and you're making that decision-making process of what you want to do, I really do encourage to think about choosing who you want to work with. You might not know them. So most recently, Brooke, I wanted to work with Brooke. That was a no-brainer. So that was just like, of course I choose to work with Brooke. But more recently, I just started a new job at the University of Roehampton, and mainly it's because my boss is super great and a badass, and I wanted to work with her and learn from her. And that was a big decision-making process for me. I get you can't always do that, but I do think when you can, think about the team and what you can learn from the other person, rather than all the other factors that might be there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to have the love fest continue here, I will say a great example for me where this was a thing that I did, the second time I was trying to get a job in international ed back in the early days, I got a couple of different job offers. One was at USA working with Sam, Kate Moore, Catherine Hanley, Tony Johnson, Samantha Barrett, like some amazing humans.
Dream team.
Yeah, exactly. But I didn't know them yet. I didn't know technically, but I through the interview process, obviously I got to know you, and especially the type of work I was going to get to do, and just seeing, Sam and Kate in their element, I was like, oh God, I want to be like them when I grow up. And, and then I got another job offer that was a more traditional, like kind of environment. It was at a top, university in a study abroad office, very traditional role. But I felt like, okay, the dynamic and the mojo in this office just wasn't as exciting for me. And so while I didn't know yet that these individual people would be super amazing to work with, there was definitely that sense of like innovation and forward momentum. Whereas the other one, I got more of like, okay, we have a system and we need somebody to like make the system churn. And I love systems, but I like creating them and then moving on to the next thing. So I think that is a really great point, and I'm so happy I made that choice. And I was told at the time that I was making the biggest mistake of my career, and I proved that wrong in every way. So, the next one for me is to be a dream come true. And I talk about this a lot. I do a keynote talk I call How to Be a Rock Star. And this is one of those core elements, I think, of how to be exceptional in any field or industry or career path you want to go on. What I mean by this is that people want to work with people who are problem solvers. They don't create more work. They don't create more challenges, more hurdles, more animosity, more negativity. They want people who are like, okay, like, how do we move forward? What are the possibilities? How do we mitigate, the negative thing that's happening right now, as opposed to like, woe is me, this is it. Also, I think too, is that it's kind of going to lead to the next thing I'm going to talk about after Sam, but it's also about like not creating more responsibility and weight on other people that isn't necessary. And if you really want something, if you really want to move things forward, is like, I think you have to be the person who moves the ball down the field as far as you can take it before you absolutely have to hand it off. So one of the things I taught my staff at Go Abroad is that the example I'm going to share is that one time someone came into the office, to our one-on-one meeting that week and wanted a raise. She wanted to talk about she deserved a raise. And her argument was that I want to raise the cost of living is changing, and, I've worked here for a year. I feel like it's time, etc. So basically I spent that whole hour coaching her on how to negotiate a raise so that the next week she could come back and actually carry the ball down the field for herself in a way that would make me go, okay. Because I knew the argument technically. I was like, well, the way I would present it is like, tell me about how you've grown this for the organization. You've done this and what you've done for the organization that justifies you being rewarded more. And she just didn't know that yet. Another instance, then I started training all my staff on how to negotiate, which is like, you're not supposed to, I guess, are you supposed to do that for your own team? Like, this is how you're supposed to negotiate to me. But I was like, well, I want you to know how to negotiate the rest of your career. Then, another instance was a staff member came to me and said, I want to go to this conference, like full stop. Can I go, period? And using her professional development money for that. And I said, well, the better way is for you to write up basically a proposal. What is the conference? What is the value that you're going to get out of this? And then how are you going to translate that value into the work that you do for our organization? Because it definitely tied in, but basically she was making me work for it. And I had to ask, like, well, why is this going to help you be better at your job? How's that going to help our bottom lines of reach, revenue, and impact, right? So all of those elements sort of had to go and say, okay, and then break down the cost for me. How much is it going to cost? What are the extending fees and things that, from flights and hotels, et cetera. And then tell me how you're going to give me a 10x value from that cost. And that to me is a dream come true. And I'll let you guys know that, like, after that one person did that, and then I taught the whole team how to do that, they went off to go to some great conferences outside of international ed specifically to learn some really important element and strategies and tactics and tools that we use for the organization that did have amazing ROI for the company. But it really required them to do that upfront, carry the ball down the field so that I could understand the value that it brought. So there's a lot of ways you can do that, but if you can just think, like, how can I make getting to yes that much easier? And that will make you a dream come true. It's like, if I got an email proposal from somebody and it was like all these details, and blah, 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 and this is how it's going to help the organization, it's so easy to say yes, because I'm like, yeah, I want all of those benefits and I want all of those results, and I want, that much more money coming to the organization, or, that amazing social media strategy to be implemented with us, whatever it is, it's like, yeah, I want those things. And so the more you can show people how what you want is valuable to them, the more, and becoming that dream come true, the more you're likely to get yeses to those hard questions. That's it.
Yes. I think you're going to cover this, so I'm going to leave my comment, but okay. I'm just saying that out loud so I remember, everybody. That's for me. Okay, this is my next tip is around curiosity. So be curious. Sounds really simple. It's some of the best advice I've ever had, and I have found it's helpful in two different ways. One, in this idea of networking and relationship building, which I know can sometimes be a dirty word in international education. But I have found that being curious, having maybe natural curiosity, or sometimes just having to change my mindset, has really helped me in the field. But it's also helped me stay on track as a professional in my own learning of what other people do and how I can then effectively contribute to what we're all collectively trying to do, right? We're all here to help craft global citizens and hopefully change the world in some way. But I also think the Be Curious has really helped me in sort of the day-to-day of working in our fields with students, or even with colleagues, when we're in conflict, which happens a lot. The reason it's the best advice is, when you're in that advising position, and you might be saying the same thing over and over again to a student year after year, right? It's their first time going abroad, but it's your maybe millionth time talking about it, which is true. We get fatigue, right? We get fatigue in what we're talking about, and there can be some frustration in that. A life coach actually said this to me: can you be curious about that person's journey or where they are? And the answer is, yeah, I probably can. And so sometimes just reminding myself to be curious has been helpful in just being a better human. So maybe this is just a better human tip.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also found that it's helped me have maybe those difficult conversations in my career with colleagues, with people I'm partnering with, really with anyone, where we might have some tension or there's some conflict or something. Just maybe being curious about their perspective or really where they're coming from has, one, helped me make it less personal, right? And so I can come up sort of with we can maybe come to some sort of collaboration or agreement. But again, just remembering that we're all coming at this with different perspectives, with different strengths, with different skills, with different things that we think are really important. And sometimes just that curiosity of, oh, I wonder what I'm missing here, has, for me, been helpful in better understanding them, but also just, taking the tension away and things like that. Is that helpful? I find that I'm a post-it note with that. Be curious. If I get stuck, be curious.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, one of the things I have learned, I think very related to this, and I'm going to talk about depression very quickly, and I hope it's not triggering for anyone, but I'm trying to be very open about my struggle with depression because I want to normalize mental health issues and challenges. And one of the things that in my counseling that's been really helpful is to, instead of like seeing the negative or experiencing the negative or the challenge, the hurdle, any synonym here, instead of being like, oh, like dwelling on that, internalizing it, identifying with it, as instead having the verbiage of like, isn't that interesting? Or like you say, isn't that curious? And sort of like having it away from myself in my case. And I think that is like a great tool I've been trying to use more because I'm a very impassioned person and I can get very excited about a thing. And, if I hit a roadblock or I hit a challenge, I can just be like, oh, like the world is ending, instead of saying, that's curious that I'm having this challenge or that we had that roadblock. Wonder what caused that, wonder why this is happening, how can we create a detour around it, whatever, and having that curiosity and that isn't that interesting sort of perspective on it, instead of being like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst person ever, at least in my case. So I think that is such good advice. I just want to make sure y'all are with us. If you want to let us know in the chat if any of this is resonating with you, and if you have any of your own stories to share, we'd love to hear them. So the last one, are we on the last one? Yeah.
Yeah, and then I have one more.
Oh,
right?
okay. So yeah.
You have one? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Count, everybody.
Yeah. So the next one for me is to learn how to manage people. And I think I mean this in the obvious way in terms of, I think we should all be learning skills on how to manage a team that we are the direct supervisor of, or, a whole org chart of people that you might be managing. But I would say that managing people has been the hardest part in my whole career. Not even, I would say managing people is harder than landing that first job and study abroad, which was always hard. I just think it's really challenging because it's so dynamic. There's no like cut and dry rules that just are going to work in every situation for every person. And so that makes it really challenging because you have to be agile, you have to be fluid, and tailor kind of your approach to individual people and personalities in some capacity. So I just highly recommend learning how to manage people. And every time I've ever managed people, I was just thrown into the deep end.
Mhm.
I right out of college and grad school, I was managing like a team of 8 RAs. Like they were undergrads, but like they reported to me, and I was like, I don't know. And I was like literally the same age as 2 of them. And I was like, I don't know how to do this. And then another time that I was thrown into the deep end was like when I went to go abroad, and I had managed people at that point, but not, 2 offices on 2 continents in 2 very different cultures. And that was a whole like kerfuffle, as I like to say. So I really think, and I'd love to know too if anybody knows of any resources for not
Yes.
just like general leadership management, like how to manage people. And if we need to make a workshop about that, let us know, because I just think that is a skill set that's really hard, and it's not intuitive, I don't think. And at least maybe not for me. And I think it's something that's going to be super valuable. And so that's the obvious way to manage people. But I think generally speaking too, even if you're not in a supervisory role, it is really important to understand how to manage people, whether you're managing laterally and your peers, right? You're a co-study abroad advisor situation in an office, or managing your colleague in the financial aid office in some capacity, or managing up to your supervisor and communicating what your needs are and how they can support you. All of those things are, and then of course managing personalities and dynamics outside of that supervisor manager roles. I just think that is incredibly important. I don't have like exact, like, here's how to do it step by step, because it is such a movable feast, but I'd love to know if that's like a topic maybe we should dive into in the future, maybe bring on an expert on managing people.
Yes, please. I have very strong opinions about this.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in if that's okay. I feel like there's a, I think this is true of probably any industry, but I think being a manager means understanding that that is your job, and your job is to answer the difficult questions, and your job is to help your colleagues do their jobs better.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like in our field, and maybe lots of fields, there's this understanding that if you're good enough at something, then you can all of a sudden manage people. And these are 2 different skills, right? Knowing a lot about international education is not the same as managing a team of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people in our field get it wrong. And I do feel strongly about it. And I wish there was more training, and also just openness to feedback. There's a lot of writing out there about ways to manage teams, with kindness, and flexibility and things like that. And I feel like a lot of people do the exact opposite. I think it would be I'm saying yes that I think we should do a session on this. But I think the best thing I've ever heard when I've had to move into management positions is to someone reminding me, actually Ann Haverkern, she's my mentor in the field and has been literally for 20 years. And I will always remember her telling me, if you're a manager, you are signing up for those things. That is what you're signing up for. And the best thing you can do is help the person you're managing move on to that next job. And it might not be staying with you. That's literally one of the best things that you can do. Anyway, sorry.
No, I think that's great. I will add, like, I always, kind of jokingly, but very seriously, explain how, I have the ability to sort of be both administrative, like, let's put a system together person, but I'm also more likely to be a visionary ideas person. And when I started at Go Abroad and I was working with Troy Peden, and if for those of you who know Troy, he is an ideas man. He has a million business ideas a day, a million strategies a day. Like, he wants to do it, and he wants to do it all yesterday. And so a lot of my role at Go Abroad was, I had a team I was managing, of course, that worked under me, so to speak. But I just spent a lot of my time managing up to Troy, because and a lot of times I had to be like, that's a great idea. Let's look at our capacity as an organization, and where does that fit in terms of like our goals that we said we had for the year, et cetera. So it's kind of having to understand how to wrap understand who you're working with and their style, and how to not sort of smash them down, but also wrap that into an existing system. So yeah, managing people in all directions. And we got
Yeah.
some votes for it. It looks like
Yes.
in the chat. Natalie said yes. Michelle said yes. Or sorry, Natalie said yes. So thank you for that. And really good. Oh, she said, I wish there was a class on how to be a manager. Okay, we need to figure that out. We will work on that. Thank you
Yeah.
for that. All right, Sam, you're up.
So this is my last top tip. And actually I'm stealing this a little bit from one of our coaching sessions that we just had with GPI, because it was such a good point. And I think for those of you that are newer to the field, for those of you that are in the field and still going, yay. I think it's sometimes good to have a reminder that a career is a long game, right? It's not all going to happen at once. And you may have a certain goal to have a certain job or career, and then realize that maybe that's not a right fit. So for me, a good example of this is when I was a study abroad advisor at Babson College. Great university, loved it, and wanted to be a study abroad advisor. And there's lots of it that I liked, but that's not my perfect role. But I didn't know that until I was in it and doing it. And so, and I was a certain age at that point. I had sort of quote unquote made it. I was doing what I wanted to do, and then realized that there's a lot of things that I wanted to do differently, and then moved on in my career to really focus on international internships and work with students on placements, which I love, and work with companies and organizations with young interns and helping that employability, sort of that intersection. But that was my long game. And maybe I'll change again. I don't know. Still young, aren't I? But I think sometimes it's helpful, and this is for me too, to remember it's a long game. There's no such thing as a perfect job. There's going to be aspects that you like and don't like, and then things that you realize as you go that you're really good at or not good at. And so, it's puzzle pieces that you put together until you find maybe the 80-20, the 90-10 of there's always going to be stuff that you don't like to do, but if you're happy with most of it, then I feel like that's the ultimate goal.
I love it. Keep talking, because I'm adding a poll question real quick.
Oh yes. Yeah, so it's a long game. I don't know if anyone relates to that. Let me give you something that I've used with students before that I often think about with this long game idea, which is Simon Sinek. I don't know if I'm saying his name right.
Yep.
I'm sure a lot of you know who he is. He does a lot of good YouTube videos and things like that. But one of his videos is about setting goals. And he talks about, I'm paraphrasing here and I'm just go watch the video, but he talks about setting goals and how some people will set these goals and then become very depressed and destroyed once they reach those goals. And so he talks about the Olympic swimmer, is his name Michael Phelps? Am I making this up? I'm not very sporty. And how, you get there, you win the gold medal. He won a gold medal, right? So you
like
get
8 of them. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Gosh, sorry guys. I have other talents and they're not sports. So, you get there, you win those gold medals, and then afterwards drop into depression or then you have this existential crisis, where what do you do now? So I think it's important to remember that's why it is a long game. You're going to have maybe little goals, but also remember you can set other goals, you can reevaluate. Mm-hmm. Lockdown is a good time to do that.
Yeah. I think, for me, the, my example of that was I went into grad school. I was like that kid who was like, I studied abroad and now I love study abroad and I'm going to work in study abroad, like all the things. And I'm going to be the director of study abroad at a Division I university. That's how I labeled it. And in, about 3 years from setting that goal, I technically achieved it. And I turned out I didn't really like it. And so I could have been really sad about that. But as I learned new things, learned new skills, tested the waters in different areas, I found that there was a specific area of our field, because I was still very passionate about global learning, how I could use my talents and gifts in a way that moves the larger needle for all for what we're trying to do. Oh, you don't see the poll? This is why I'm not a
Yeah.
techie. There
So
should
at
be
the
a poll. Oh, launch poll. Oh, just kidding. I've launched the poll. There we go. Uh, yeah. So I think that, realizing that, I always tell people, what's your next best step? The thing that you could do
yeah.
for your career right now, not the version you want to be in 10 years from now, but like what could help you right now, and do that thing, and then the next thing, etc. So, yeah, so the poll, basically, I just wanted to get some more feedback from y'all, especially since you showed up live to 2 different digital platforms, and wanted to know if you like these live sessions, especially when we do our interview series. We've done a couple of them in the past already, or if you're like, nah, you could probably just do them, behind the scenes and then load them to the podcast, that'd be fine. I'd love your feedback, because we don't have to do it this way. But people are showing up, so it seems like it's valuable. I know people are spending a lot of time on video calls, so I also don't want to add to the noise in that capacity. But it looks like so far, a lot of people are said they love the live podcast recordings. This is great. 2 people are like, don't need the video. That's totally fair. So we are going to be loading these to the podcast feed. So for the future, if you're like, I don't really want to make the time for the live sessions, you can always subscribe to the podcast. Just search for Inside Study Abroad on your favorite podcast app and subscribe there. They do go up a week to 2 weeks after the live version. So just be aware of that. And yeah, hopefully that's helpful. But thanks for all the responses. You guys are amazing. And so just to close it up, thank you all for attending live. If you're listening to the podcast and you want to attend one live, make sure that you subscribe to the email list where we announce these sessions to the email list. So just head to insidestudyabroad.com/subscribe and you'll be able to get on the list. And then don't forget, we have a bunch of workshops and trainings coming up. Next week, I'm hosting a free live masterclass on how to build an online business. If you don't care about that, do not worry about it. But I'd love to see you there if you do. And then don't forget to get on the GPI waitlist, because we're rolling that out in about 2 months. So love to see you in the fall cohort. Anything else you want to say, Sam?
No, that's it. Thanks for listening to us talk about our tips. And hopefully they were helpful. And yeah, we'll see you at the next one.
Yeah, and thank you all. I've got Christopher, Michelle, Basma. You're welcome, Claudia, for being here. Steph, yeah, Simon Sinek. She's like, yeah, it's Simon Sinek. Marty is here. So great to see you all, and thank you all for being here. And have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye.
Bye, guys.